Out of the blue, is there a Boston College player that could find a home in the NFL? It may be someone you'd be surprised to know about.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black of Eagle Insider. I've been the host of this show for 5 years, and I love talking to you about Boston College sports every single day. So all of you who made us your first listen, I want to thank each and every one of you. On today's show, we're going to look at how the punting can't be any worse than last year. It's going to get better. And while the pass rush can't get any better, it's probably going to get a little worse. Let's call that the regression to the mean. We're also going to talk about how passing has finally come back to Boston College and in the offense, and why that is making a bigger role in the offense. We'll look at that. And then finally, one player had a big game in the NFL Pro Day at Boston College, and I'll explain who that is in just a moment. But first of all, we need to welcome Mitch Wolf of Eagle Insider. We haven't had him on for a while. Mitch, how's it going?
It's going well. I've been perfecting my morning routine, buying truckloads of Saratoga Springs water, rubbing banana peels on my face. So everything's going great.
Excellent. So practices started. Last year you got to go. Now you're too far away to get to it. But I wanted to bring Mitch on because Mitch always has great insight into BC football. Even if he can't see it, he has things to talk about. And I know you guys love listening to me talk, but let's get Mitch in here to talk a little bit. So I said to him, Mitch, give me 3 topics you want to talk about today. And Mitch figured it out pretty quick. So let's start off with Pro Day. Now, I'll lead it in for you. Pro Day, for anyone who's not a scout, you don't get the statistics. We've been asking, you get ignored. But
for years,
and this is not any specific staff. It's been like this forever. Now, you're seeing more and more numbers starting to leak, and you wonder yourself, who's leaking those numbers? I would bet anything it's the players' agents that are leaking those numbers, especially if they're good, or if they want to juice them up a little bit. There's no one to even say, that's not right.
I would argue it's even more likely that if it's the agent, if they're not that good, because otherwise because the good players you're going to hear, like, you look at Ohio State, like everybody was talking about Emeka Egbuka's numbers. Everybody was talking about all this other stuff. If you're the bottom of the wrong players, that's where the agent's got to do the work and get the numbers out. And, they're probably shaving a few hundredths of a second off, adding an inch or two onto some of the jumps and such. So, yeah, I mean, I would say any pro day numbers be generally a little skeptical, just because, every player, every school's facility is different. They might have a certain part in the track where maybe it's a bit of a downslope. Maybe it's actually 39.5 yards instead of 40, stuff like that. So, or, generally a lot of these practice facilities are faster tracks. So, keep all that in mind when you're looking at pro day numbers compared to combine numbers, which are generally better just because everything's standardized, because everybody's competing on the same field.
So when it comes to BC in the draft, there's been 4 guys that everyone's talking about. It's the 2 offensive linemen, Drew Kendall and Ozzie Trapillo, Donovan Ezeraku, and Cam Horsley, the 4 that went to the NFL Combine. Now, Pro Day, you got a chance to see some other players. And honestly, most of them, maybe there's a few campers in there, but many of them you're just like, it's probably not going to work out. But that's part of what Pro Day is about, right? One name that popped out is a player that missed most of last year, or a good chunk of it. And it sounds like he had a really good Pro Day. I mean, the numbers that are coming out are good, but we don't know that. But, maybe he's a guy that could sneak into the 7th round or, an undrafted free agent. That's Cam Arnold. Cam Arnold got hurt this season, didn't play most of the second half. What are your thoughts about him as a potential pro recruit or prospect? Sorry, I'm always in college football mode.
Yeah. So just to go over it in case people didn't see it, in case you didn't mention it. So the report comes from Phil Perry of NBC Sports Boston. I'm assuming he got these numbers from Cam's agent. Comes in at 6'1", 227 pounds, a 4.58 second 40, 38-inch vertical, 10-foot 3-inch broad jump, 7.07 second 3-cone, and a 4.21 short shuttle. Last of which would have been the fastest among all the linebackers at the combine. So that's very impressive. And the other numbers all would have been top 10. Actually even top 5. The 4.58 would have been 6, but everything else would have been top 5 among the combine linebackers. And if you put that into the relative athletic score formula made by Kentley Platt Math Bomb, great website for all this kind of stuff, you put all those numbers in and it turns out an RAS, relative athletic score, of 8.91 out of 10, which is excellent for a linebacker. Again, I wasn't there. I didn't see him work out in the drills. All the reporting you're going to see from BC side is everybody looked great and everybody worked really hard to get here. So, there's not a lot of critical analysis going on, but you're running around in your shorts and a t-shirt and you're hitting bags. You're not really hitting people. So take it with a grain of salt. Again, take the numbers with a grain of salt because I would imagine they're coming from his agent, but you always want to see better numbers than worse numbers, regardless of what position you're playing. So that's good to see. And when you watch Arnold, at least watching his tape, because I was rewatching it and putting together his scouting report for the website recently, you can see the athleticism on tape. When he goes, he's fast, he moves pretty well. There's not a ton of like stiffness or anything like that. The thing with Arnold, and this is where it's frustrating, is that even as a fourth year starter, fifth year player, it's just not clicking as fast as it should be for a player with that much experience. He has almost 3,000 defensive career snaps, and has played in a lot of different schemes, has seen a lot of football, but you see him just not recognize what the offense is trying to do, and you don't see him be as explosive as he needs to be. And if he does, sometimes there's plenty of times where you'll see him make mistakes where he'll overrun a play or he'll kind of just run himself right into being blocked. And at 6'1", 227, he's not this big hulking linebacker that can, and again, to his credit, there aren't many linebackers like that left in college football. You don't see him like taking on blocks from offensive linemen and, shedding them well or, stopping them in their tracks. So he's usually getting swallowed up by offensive linemen. He's better against tight ends, obviously, but you just don't see with Cameron overall, you don't see anything that's like overwhelmingly good or great. Everything is solid to adequate, and then maybe even a little mediocre in some areas. So with that in mind, even though he does have these good athletic testing numbers, you're just not sure that a team is going to see that and be like, okay, we need to spend a draft pick on that, because frankly, there's a ton of linebackers coming out in every draft. And you're like, okay, like if we're going to spend a pick on a linebacker, he's got to have some overwhelmingly good traits. Like, okay, like that's something that we can hang our hat on and be like, he can figure out using this. Whereas, and I just really have never seen that from Arnold, even as he's, I would say, and again, he's improved a lot over his career. Every year he's gotten better. And I would say this year was his best year in only 7 games, but he's playing better in this different defensive scheme where, honestly, I think Davian Crouch deserves some of that credit because he was playing a lot better and covering a lot of ground as a better athlete than the guys that Arnold's been playing next to for the last few years. So I think that he has the athletic skills, the experience, the toughness, the effort, the hustle, all the mental intangibles to, earn a camp invite, see if he can make a roster on the practice squad as a special teamer. He has a lot of experience in special teams, like 500 career special team snaps on kick and punt coverage. So, you get a guy like that, you get him on special teams, maybe he can carve out a career there, but that's really all I see for his future in the NFL. And I just don't think a lot of teams are going to want to spend a pick on that when they don't really see a very likely path to him becoming an impactful every down defender.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Another linebacker BC had that was athletic, but also not always in the greatest spot was Isaiah McDuffie.
Mm-hmm.
Is there similarities between the two of them, and is that a good sign that maybe he could kind of like McDuffie figured it out?
Right. So that is a good discussion to have because they're similarly sized players. I would say they're both more outside linebackers. They're playing more in space than they are, playing in the box. Oh, they play in the box, but they're not staying there as much. McDuffie, at least his kind of trump card was that he was very aggressive. And when he did see it, he would go. And again, sometimes it led to overrunning, but there would also be, he would create these splash plays where he would be super aggressive and go make a play. With Arnold, you just don't really see that. And there's too many, mistakes where it's like, you're not playing fast enough. And McDuffie, it's like, okay, you're playing fast. We just got to hone you in. And also with McDuffie, when he left, he was a redshirt junior. Like, I think he just signed that contract with the Packers, and I think he's 26 years old. Arnold's in his 5th year of college football. He's probably going to be 23 or 24 as a rookie, and he's still not seeing it as fast as he needs to be. So it's an interesting comparison because there are similarities between them as players, but if you watch them closely, you would see like McDuffie had this playmaking gene where when he saw it, he would go. And, sometimes the other player would make a play and he would get out of position, and it is what it is. But there'd be plenty of times where he would go make this big blow up play where it's like, okay, this we can hang our hat on. He's a younger player. He has time to develop, and he's developed into a solid rotational linebacker for the Packers.
All right. In our next segment, Mitch is going to talk about the passing game, where it's finally starting to click, and we'll talk about why and how Bill O'Brien has kind of changed how BC's offenses run. We'll get into that in just a moment. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you just stop managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using money, I realized how much I was spending eating out every week. I had to stop it. And now I know how much I'm spending, and I can budget and save more. And with managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track, share, and your personal account, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Locked On Boston College, AJ Black here with Mitchell Wolf of Eagle Insider. Folks, if you've not checked out Eagle Insider right now until I think we just got it extended until April 24th, all the way through spring camp, 50% off Eagle Insider. I just put up 2 4-star recruits coming just tomorrow or today, if you're listening today, to Boston College. One of them I hadn't even talked about yet. So you're going to want to make sure you check that out on Eagle Insider. You can get in for a cup of coffee. Hope you guys sign up today. Now, the passing game was something that kind of took time. It had its moments under Thomas Castellanos last year, but it really started to explode under Grayson James. And we started to see what Bill O'Brien can do with an offense here at Boston College that was beyond what Jeff Hafley did. Mitch, you were looking at some of the numbers. Talk about where this passing game kind of came from and where it's going.
So to plug the website again, I recently published an article that focused on the mesh wheel play that figured into BC's passing game so much in 2024. Article's free. Everybody can read it. I highly recommend go read it. Has a lot of film clips from the 49 times that BC ran that play and the counters off it. But it got me thinking about the passing game. And again, the big question is going to be who's going to be the starting quarterback. I think we still are probably leading Grayson James. It seems like Dylan Lonergan is making it a competition, which is good to see. Competition makes players better. But I think regardless of who's a quarterback, I think you're going to see a more efficient passing game that is what Bill O'Brien wanted all along. And thinking about how this team is going to be constructed, I think you're going to see the offense have its highest passing percentage of play calls since at least 2022, and probably be over 50% for only the third time since 2016. So the only times where it's been over 50% were in 2022 at 65.9%, which makes sense. Team was terrible. They were behind a lot. They had to throw the ball all the time. And in 2020 at 58.9%, which offensive line was kind of just wonky. COVID year. Phil Dracovic actually played well, so they threw the ball a lot more. But those are the only 2 seasons in the previous 8 years, something like that, since 2016, that the passing percentage has been over 50%. And I think you'll see that continue. And I don't think it's gonna be crazy. Like I don't think it'll be above 55%. It might not even be above 52. But I think you'll see a much more balanced offense. And part of it is a negative thing in that I think the offensive line is going to be taking another step back. And not shading anybody, I'm just saying you lose 2 NFL players and Jack Conley, your offensive line is probably going to get worse in terms of pass protecting. And if you think about the times that Thomas Castellanos and Grayson James did have to drop back to pass, think about all those pockets they had where they would just stand there for 3, 4, 5 seconds. And, then sometimes they'd scramble, sometimes they get rid of the ball, whatever. But that's probably not going to be the case this year. You're probably going to see some more quick pressures. And so to mitigate that, to give the offensive line a break, you're probably going to see more quick passing. And that's something that Grayson James is pretty good at. It's something that Dylan Lonergan has flashed the ability to do in very limited reps in live games, albeit against lesser competition, and in spring practice or in the spring games for Alabama. So you have these quarterbacks that are more structured, are better equipped to operate the quick passing game. And I think that'll help open up the offense overall. I think we saw how obviously that he does enjoy having this play action passing game where you do have a decent run game and you can build play action passes off that. But you also, I think you're going to see basically a complete passing game where you have the quick, the intermediate, the deep, play action, screen, what have you. Because and towards the end of the year, we did finally see the screen game get going a little bit. So once you see all these things happen, you can say, okay, this is finally be a complete passing game that might even become the identity of the offense. Because if you throw 2022 out because the offense was just terrible overall, you could even, and then 2020 was COVID year, 2020 of quarterback issues. But you think back for really since even Steve Adazio's first year, this team's identity has been running the ball, except for like a few outliers. And I think that this team's identity might be passing, or it's just going to be we are a truly balanced offense that puts the defense in a bind because they do not know what we are going to do on any given down.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a nice change of pace because,
Mhm.
Even though it's nice to have this great running game that you can rely on all the time, but it's just like, okay, they know we're going to run, or they know BC's going to run. And we saw that have some drawbacks when they got into those fourth and short plays where everybody knew they were running the ball and they got stuffed once or twice. They also converted plenty of times, which people conveniently forget. And they just like to say, oh, the quarterback's in the shotgun. We didn't convert. This never works. It's like, well, we actually have converted a bunch of 4th and 1s on show with the quarterback in the shotgun, but I digress. So I think that is something that could be the saving grace for this team. Because I think you're going to see I think when I'm looking at this team versus last year's, and we'll talk about this a little in the third segment, I think you could see a more well-rounded team, but I also think that means that you're not going to have some of the high highs. You might not have the low lows, and that's partially with some really good players going off the NFL. And I think that it's like you could say it's like generally the average of the team is higher, or the median, I guess, is higher, but it might not necessarily lead to more wins, especially because looking at this year's schedule compared to last year's, it seems like it's going to be a little bit harder.
Yeah, I look at the offense and I look at what Bill O'Brien needs to do, and what one thing that has kind of stuck out to me is, I think this could be the opportunity this year to see why people are excited about having Bill O'Brien as a coach, because he's going to be able to adjust. Because you go back to the previous two coaches, you had Jeff Hafley and his offensive coordinators who just struggled to adapt at times. It just seemed like they didn't at times knew what to do. And then Steve Adazio just kept doing whatever the hell he wanted to do over and over and over again and never changed. So you finally have a coach that could adapt to the strength, as you said, right? Last year there was a lot of running. And this year, if the offensive line is struggling, I truly believe Bill O'Brien's going to identify that. And him and Will Lawing are going to be able to fix this and make the offense adjust to what they have and what they don't have.
And I think it's not even necessarily just about adjustments. And I think we even did see that during the 2024 season, but it's just saying we're not putting all our eggs in certain baskets. And then if that falls apart, then we have big problems. And that's been a problem for BC, like you said, for the longest time. I think this is one it's like, okay, if one thing isn't working, this offense isn't going to be doomed. Like, we have multiple avenues to create a successful game plan based on the opponent, and that makes the offense in theory more dangerous. Obviously they have to go out and execute. The offensive line, I don't think it's going to be 2022 levels of bad. Nothing close to that, but like if they are like, struggling, then it's like, okay, we have to really, continue to think about how we're going to change this offense. But again, there should be multiple ways for this offense to find success. Even though I would say with most of the offense, I wouldn't say there's, overwhelmingly great players. There's no Zay Flowers. There's no AJ Dillon or anything. And there's guys who have flashed and we like: Lewis Bond, Turbo Richard, Jeremiah Franklin, Reed Harris, all that. And maybe Reed Harris could be the exception. We'll see. But I think there's some ideas, or there's some logic behind the idea. It's okay if you don't have that one elite guy, then who's kind of your we got to have it in a dire situation. But that's where the responsibility falls on Bill O'Brien, where it's like you kind of have to, and I guess Will Lawing, you guys have to be the guys to elevate the rest of this team. So I think a lot will fall on them this year to maximize the potential of this offense, because I think that there's a very solid floor there, I think, to be a competent offense, and it's kind of up to them to say, okay, how high can we push this ceiling?
Before we get to our third segment, I told you before we got on the air that I might have a question for you. And this is something I had mentioned to you probably about a month ago. We never really got to it on the air. Last year, when we got to spring camp, the one player that was on our lips after camp that no one was talking about, actually it was more summer camp, was Reed Harris, like completely out of the blue. No one knew. I mean, people had heard of him, but no one knew that he could do what he did.
No, I mean, I went to that practice in August, and then about halfway through, I'm like, okay, they've got something here. This guy's gonna be something.
So I had asked Mitch to think about what player on this roster is someone that no one's talking about right now that we're going to be talking about in September. And who did you come up with?
I'm honestly having trouble remembering now.
I can tell you. I remember who you told me. If you
yeah.
want me to tell you, you told me Zaire Torrance.
That's right. Yeah. So for me, and this is going to flip to the defensive side of the ball, but Zaire Torrance got a little bit of playing time on special teams last year, a little bit of playing time on defense. You know, you saw guys like Carter Davis, Omar Thornton really emerge and be valuable. But it makes me wonder, okay, could Zaire Torrance, after a year of being on special teams, could he elevate and become somebody that is competing for the slot defender position? Because right now it's Cam Martinez, Carter Davis. There was talk about him playing that last year. I guess and the same could go for Omar Thornton. But if we're going for somebody who really like no buzz, because we know about Carter Davis, we know about Omar Thornton. They had some good plays last year. So I mean, Zaire Torrance's biggest play was the forced fumble against Michigan State in the red bandana game on the kickoff return. But other than that, didn't really make a huge impact. But that's the guy where I could say, okay, there's a role there. There's a place on the depth chart where it's like there needs to be an impact player here. Cam Martinez had that one big game against Virginia Tech. Other than that, was not that great. And I think the other options are freshmen, whether it be true or redshirt. So I think that's a guy that we could see. We get into August and be like, oh, he's making some plays, and then suddenly in September he's a main fixture of this defense. So Zaire Torrance is the name. When you ask this question when you ask the question right now, and you considering we talked about the offense, I was like, did I say it about anybody in the offense? I don't think I did, because at least for what it's worth, most of the guys in the offense we have at least talked about to some extent, and we know a little bit about what they're capable of doing.
So for me, I've talked about him already on the podcast. So it's kind of as a cop out but it was one that Mitch and I have actually not really joked about, but kind of like, why is he still on the roster? But his name pops up more and more and more and more and more now, which is Clive Wilson. I don't know where.
Sorry.
I mean, he's playing, with a lot of the starters right now, making plays during camp. So he's out there practicing. I'm going to throw this one out there as a guy that you have an edge position that you don't know who's going to be there.
That's fair. Yeah.
What if this dude comes out of nowhere and grabs this, and he's healthy finally, it's his third or fourth year with the team, he figures something out. I could be completely wrong here, but I'm going to go with Clive Wilson. That's my guy. It's a position of need. It's a guy out of the blue. That's me.
Yeah, you're putting one chip on one number on the roulette table and just praying with this. I mean, again, he has the length, he has the frame. He's really just a complete unknown at this point.
I'm going to the scrimmage on Saturday, and I'm just going to sit there and watch him. And I don't even know I think he's numbered 91. I don't even remember.
95.
95. There we go.
The way that you preface this segment, I honestly thought you were going to say Luke McLaughlin.
Oh, no, I'm not going down that road.
Sorry, Cooper Kupp.
All right. Anyways, in our final segment, we're going to talk about the potential of things changing that were good to more the median, and from the bad to the median. I'll explain what I mean by all that in just a moment. We're all about stats because numbers don't lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are at an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team, plus the gear, wherever you need to go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. So take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more at Nissan USA today. This is Locked On Boston College. AJ Black here of Eagle Insider. I'm joined by my staff writer, Mitch Wolf of Eagle Insider. when you're done with today's show, check out Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin. Lots of stuff going on in terms of recruiting and coaching changes. Check out Spencer McLaughlin and Locked On College Football on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And also, check this out.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Someday I will be on that show. Just not for a while for BC basketball.
No,
but we're not talking about BC basketball. We're talking about BC football. And there were two statistics you wanted to talk about and the way that they're going to regress to the mean, to that average in the middle. Mitch, what did you want to talk about?
So the first one is I'm going to talk about is pass rush. And I know you talked about this a few episodes ago. And going back 2 off seasons, I guess, I talked about how basically there was no way the pass rush was going to be as unproductive as it was in 2023. And BC had 13 sacks that year. I think half of them came against Virginia. And it was a disaster in terms of getting sacks. But they had a very high pressure rate. I think they were like 30 or 35th in pressure rate, which is that's pretty good. And then the next year, lo and behold, Donovan Ezeraku has one of the best seasons in team history. They're getting a ton of sacks in almost every game, minus a little blip in the middle of the season. Even though the pressure rate went down, I think in 2023 they were at like 36% maybe, and in 2024 they were like 33. So looking at this upcoming year, and this should seem logical. This should seem pretty obvious, but BC is probably not going to be as productive as they were in 2024 in terms of getting sacks. Obviously, lose Donovan Ezeraku, you actually end up losing 65% of your sacks and 40% of your pressures from everybody leaving the roster from 2024 to 2025. So both of those numbers are going to go down. And I'm saying this because it's like, okay, we have to expect this and not everybody lose their minds when, nobody's having a Donovan Ezeraku year, because that is an outlier year. That's a crazy good year. As he had crazy games where he was dominating opponents. There's probably not somebody on the roster that's going to do that, minus your Clive Wilson bet.
Clive Wilson's going to do it.
Yeah, Clive Wilson, 20 sack season incoming. But in all seriousness, like, this is something we need to be aware of, where it's like, okay, unless they changed, and I'll get to this later, unless they completely change the defensive scheme and are doing things that we just have no idea about them doing, you're probably going to see the pressure rate decrease a little bit, sack rate go back to somewhere between where it was in 2023 and where it was in 2024. I think the sack rate was like 7% in 2024. So you're probably going to see it settle somewhere around 5, which is a little below average, but it's not catastrophically bad. Now, I think the question to answer there is, what is Tim Lewis going to do differently to, make up for it? And I do wonder if he's going to get a lot more aggressive when it comes to blitzing. We saw that happen towards the end of the 2024 season, where if you look at their last few games, let me see. So against against Nebraska, they blitzed 61% of dropbacks, 41.5% against Pitt, 50% against UNC, 30.6 against SMU, 32% against Syracuse, not that high, but 41.5% against Louisville. So you saw it towards the end of the year where after that month of October, they weren't really getting a lot done. He dialed up the blitz rate. They started getting a lot more pressure, started getting more sacks. So I wonder if he's going to play that a lot more aggressively. We're going to see a lot more blitzes, a lot more simulated pressures, try to confuse the offense. Because if you look at BC's blitz rate since 2016, it's been pretty consistent between like 31 and 35%. In 2016, it was actually 40.5%, which is insanely high. But I think that might have been Don Brown's last year, so that makes sense. But since then, it's all been between about 31 and 35%. And so I wonder if you see him dial that up to like about 36 or 37%, where they're sending everybody from everywhere, just trying to create havoc in the backfield. And the thing with blitzing is it's like throwing a fastball. It's like, if the guy can't hit it, then sorry, you're great plays. But if he does see it and he hits it, you could give up a big play or big hit. So, it's a bit risky, but given the personnel they have, you might have to kind of be creative and think of some other avenues to start getting pressure on the quarterback.
So the pass rush is definitely going to be something I think a lot of folks are going to be watching for. And the other spot we're looking at is my favorite topic, and everyone it's been the topic of du jour for the last like 2 weeks is punting.
Mhm.
Punting was really bad last year, historically bad. It was
Yep.
the worst in college football by like 3 yards per punt, I think it
Mhm.
was, or something really bad. But credit to Matt Turn and Bill O'Brien for gutting their room and going out and making their Irish backfield with, Seamus Florio and Andy Quinn to punt. So you're expecting that it's going to happen.
All right, hang on. I just thought of it. Got a new name for BC's special teams unit.
Go for it.
Conclave.
There we go.
There we go. All right, the conclave. All right. So yeah, BC last in yards per punt last year, 36.2. It's actually only half a yard worse than the next two teams, which are UTEP and Troy. The next closest Power 5 team was LSU at 39.6%, so almost 3.5 yards better. And then
It felt worse than that.
yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would hate to just even go deeper in those numbers. But another one I like to look at is the special teams EPA. So how much EPA are you losing? How many expected points added are you losing per punt? And if you just look at just special teams EPA, so all special teams, regardless of who was doing it, BC lost 29 expected points, which was 126th. The only teams in the Power 5 that were worse were actually Clemson and Syracuse.
Wow.
Syracuse was at negative 45. And worse than the FBS was UMass at negative 48. So they were really, really bad. But if you just go over to the punting EPA, punt kick, I believe BC was second to last. Actually, they're 123rd at negative 2.85. Oh, no, sorry, negative 3.97. So nearly 4 points lost on every punt. And if you think about the way I like to explain EPA, is basically your field position determines how likely you are to score. And so basically, how BC punted was the difference between a touchdown and a field goal for opposing offenses, which is terrible.
Wow.
You saw the entire season. Now, the opposite of the regression to me is positive regression because BC, and this is very much like the sack thing in 2023. They were terrible at getting sacks in 2023, but they're pretty good at getting pressure. There's not the exact same analog, but if BC was the absolute worst, or arguably the worst punting team in 2024, and they gutted the room, pretty much everybody it's a whole different room aside from Liam Connor, who hopefully is just going to do place kicking. It just naturally has to get better, and if it doesn't, then I will be impressed about how it could possibly get worse. Again, I've said I kind of want to see if it's possible they can punt the ball backwards, just to say, hey, I saw that once, that was crazy, but the much more likely outcome is that it gets better. It may not be a weapon for BC. You've seen there's teams who have these, like the guy from San Diego State, bad guy, Matt Araiza, but he was, punt god, whatever. Michael
Florida State's guy of last year. That was like the one guy that they had that was
he's great.
Alex. Yep.
I think his last name is. And then like Michael Dixon in Texas, you see these punters, Jordan Stout at Penn State, who can flip the field and are weapons for their teams. I don't think that's going to be the case, but I watched Seamus Florio's film. I haven't watched Andy Quinn's. I'll be honest. I don't know where to get Irish film, but you said he's got a pretty booming leg at practice. If he can be your kind of distance punter, and Florio can be maybe your more placement punter, because when I did watch him, when the offense was near midfield, punting from their own 35-yard line, whatever, he was very good at getting height on the ball and placing it inside the 20 or inside the 15 where you can force a fair catch and put the other opposing offense in really bad field position. And that, again, kind of talking about a more efficient offense, more balanced offense, defense that is going to have some issues. But if you can give the defense some help by putting the opposing offense in bad field position, that can help you play much better complementary football, which that's probably what Bill O'Brien has been really trying to do since he got here.
All right, we are out of time. We have to keep this at a. We went over, but hey, it was a good discussion. Mitch, where can people find your work?
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolf, WOLFE on Twitter. Again, check out my work at Eagle Insider. We just had the Mesh Wheel article. You'll have scouting reports for all the BC players, most of the BC players in the draft. I should have mentioned this when the last time I was on, but I have started putting some of my draft stuff on Substack. It's just my name. If you can just go check that out. Everything's free so far. Just kind of want to get people reading my stuff just because I really love the NFL draft and I'm doing a lot of work on it to rank some players. So go check that out. I have edges. I have offensive tackles, centers, I'm working through some defensive tackles right now. I'm going to be trying to get a top 50 big board put up in the next few weeks. So yeah, just go check that out too, please.
All right, and you can check me out at AJ Black 247. Go over to Eagle Insider. I've got a ton of recruiting info. Check out the message board. I've been putting nuggets up there too. If you guys like just little scoops here and there, I got some good stuff up there right now. You can get 50% off. I hope you join me over there. Tomorrow's show, I will do a recruiting episode as long as BC basketball doesn't hemorrhage any more players into the transfer portal. Which who knows? I'll be here to talk all about that, and we got to prepare for Friday's game against Bentley in hockey. So I'll have a little bit to talk about with that as well. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you again tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every day.